There is a serious weakness in the Airbnb system if someone is hosting guests for the first time. How can one know what they will do? Some people who first stayed with them place great trust in someone untested. I'm sure 99% of the time everything is perfectly fine, but in my own experience, that 1% nearly got me killed. It left me deeply traumatized. It was my first time using Airbnb. I was going back to my hometown, but none of my friends had a place for me to stay with them, and I didn't really have a relationship with my family, which made staying with them a very viable option because there aren't many good hotels in a small town like mine, and Airbnb seemed like the only good option. I didn't mind because of their lack of ratings for the place I chose, and how the host had just joined the platform a week ago. I didn't really think it was important. He was just an ordinary-looking man, a middle-aged family man who was bald and had enough money to own 2 properties when I got there. I realized it was much smaller than it initially seemed, just 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. The larger of the 2 bedrooms was the one I was supposed to stay in, at the back of the house with a window facing inwards. In the backyard, the host had talked to me a few moments earlier, leaving me feeling strange, even looking back, knowing all I know now at first. It was really simple from what kind of person he actually was. Besides, I went out with my friends on the first night, and I came back late and drunk. I immediately fell into bed. Woke up in the afternoon feeling groggy. Pulled myself out of bed to get up and use the bathroom. But when I tried to open the bedroom door, it was locked. I turned the key the other way, but it made no difference. Still wouldn't open. I felt suffocated, but I still couldn't believe it was actually locked from the other side. How could that even be? I walked to the bedside table to grab my phone, but it wasn't there. I knew I left it charging there next to the bed, but it wasn't there. My mind really started racing. Maybe I left my phone in the luggage, I thought. But again, I was baffled when I searched my bag in the closet, and none of them were there. Panic and confusion started to set in. I started pacing around the room, just looking around at the sheets and all the shelves and decorations. But the more I looked, the clearer it became to me that none of my belongings were in the room. I sat on the bed to try. And make me nervous, I felt choked in the room and confused about what to do. I was also still blurry because of the hangover, and I was dehydrated with a splitting headache, and because I couldn't get out of the room to get anything, water. I thought of opening the window and letting fresh air in, and then if I couldn't think of anything else, I would just climb out. But what scared me was the window facing the backyard yesterday is now closed. My heart was truly sinking, and I suddenly wanted to vomit this can. I thought everything had reached boiling point, and I immediately ran towards the door. I tried to smash it while screaming bloody murder for the host to come. Let me out. Then what surprised me? The door opened, but its exit swung so fast it hit my face and made me fall back. And here comes the host with a rifle aimed directly at me to stare into his eyes and the tone of his voice. Everything about him was completely different. He had a strange smile on his face like a true serial killer. And everything he said to me then I had to remember. So you finally wake up, you so out of there last night. You made it easy for me to come and set up to your room for what I planned with you. Hey buddy, let me go, you sick kid. I yelled back just for him to aim the rifle at my face. He just told me to shut up if I didn't want to make things worse for myself. I then added the door opened behind him, seriously, considering trying to make a break and get through it, but he looked where I looked. I wouldn't try it if I were you, he said. The whole house is locked up for you, and I'll spend a lot of time here with you. Sicko just laughed and smiled. I didn't care to escape just like that. I've wanted to do something like this for as long as I can remember. I'll destroy you, he said. You will suffer and suffer, and you will beg me to release you first. You will be angry. You will threaten me. Then you will say you will do whatever I want when it won't work, when your soul is truly shattered because of everything I planned to put you through. You will beg for the sweet release of death then, and only then will I finally kill you after that. I'm not sure how much longer I'll do it, laughing at your torn-up corpse, but in the end, I think I'll commit suicide too. I don't intend to continue this life in prison. Everything he said hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt dizzy and I had to sit down. It made my host tickle. "It's all settled now, isn't it?" he said with a smile. "There's no way out of this for you." I struggled even to look at him, but I had to ask, "Don't you have family or someone to keep your face turned sour when I mention family? Clearly they're gone," he said. "But you have. That's what will make this whole process enjoyable for me, watching you give in to all my friends who are still wondering where I am," I said politely, finding the courage to say they'll come looking for me, yes. "And I'll know when they send you a message that our time is up," he replied. "At the exact moment when you think you'll be saved. You'll actually be damned, isn't that a beautiful twist of fate?" He said. I fell silent. I still didn't understand what was happening. I even almost didn't hear what he said next. A moment later, he caught me off guard with the handle of his gun hitting my face. I didn't faint, but I was so dizzy that I fell to the floor, and from there he continued to hit me and kick me into. Just after he ran out of breath, he left the room and locked me in again, spending the next eternity trapped in that room. While I didn't know if anyone came to help me every few hours, he would come back in and torture me. Beaten, choked, cut, and raped relentlessly repeatedly for 4 days, legs and arms broken so I couldn't move or fight. I experienced internal and external bleeding, and as he said would happen, my mind was truly shattered to the point where I almost hoped he would eventually kill me. But I forgot that I told my friends where I lived, and after I didn't come out to meet them for a few days, they went looking for me. But unlike what people said the sick man would do, he squeezed out every last second, torturing me as much as he could. And when the police stormed his house, he blew his own brains out and left me alive. But once again, I truly wished he hadn't. My husband and I often travel, and we are increasingly choosing to stay in Airbnb rather than hotels. It's homier, more unique, and provides a more personal experience that we used to enjoy, because instead of checking in with a soulless front desk clerk, you actually get to chat with the host as a human. But our last stay at Airbnb will likely be our last for us. My husband and I have stayed at a particular Airbnb on 2 other occasions, and we absolutely loved it. The decor was very cozy and suited for a romantic adventure. I think we booked this Airbnb, which was a half-duplex, when we went to San Francisco to visit our old friends who live in a very fun community outside the Bay Area. He spent a lot of time with those friends, but we were glad to have a place for us to spend time alone that didn't feel like a typical boring hotel room. We started to befriend the host as well. He's a single man around 35 years old who lives alone with his cat. My husband and I always noticed how enthusiastic he was about welcoming us. He would invite us to the side of his house for breakfast every morning, which we usually accepted because he turned out to be a good cook. It felt kind of weird to sit and eat with him, although sometimes he would ask a lot of questions, most of which weren't too weird, but some were personal, like he would ask us how long we've been married. Then he would ask us if he planned to make any children, emphasizing that he only brought it up like in making children. Then you would ask if we had ever practiced the teachings of the Kama Sutra, if you want tips or advice, or even help change the situation in the bedroom. And at that time, my husband would finally silence him with some firm words. He experienced such awkward silence, at least once every time we ate with the host, but we suffered because of it. Because it was worth the delicious free food every time the situation became tense, I would try to lighten the mood with jokes. One time the host pressed us about our fertility in the bedroom. I tried to proudly state that we've mastered all the basics to our liking. I hoped it would be a funny end to the subject, but it backfired. He started laughing hysterically. Like too intensely he even had trouble speaking, but he did it again. Came out something that sounded like, "Oh, I know you're doing a privacy violation." Suggestion really pissed off my husband, who stood up from his seat very abruptly and shouted at the host, demanding him to explain exactly what he meant. The host immediately stopped laughing and started spinning for a few seconds before finally admitting that he had heard us having sex through the wall one night. My husband and I could be loud enough, so we were somewhat forced to do it. Except this explanation that it all happened the second time we stayed. The third time we flew out to meet our friends. We discussed where we wanted to stay, and my husband brought up all the weird things the host would say, and suggested we leave elsewhere. Unfortunately, we searched for other options, and there were none that were high quality, affordable, and in the right location. So he settled in just a few minutes after making the reservation. The host sent us an SMS through the Airbnb app, and he stated an excessive amount of excitement, saying that he loved us, and that he was very happy we chose to stay with him again. He rolled his eyes and said, "Here he goes again." But at that time, it was still a little funny when we arrived. The host tried to wait on our hands and feet, but we arrived late because our flight was delayed. So we were very tired, and we asked to be left alone for the night. The host looked sad about this for a moment, but then when he walked away, he couldn't. I wanted to let this telltale smile appear on his face. The husband didn't see it, but I did. I was going to mention it to him, but my attention was diverted by something when he walked into the bedroom. We immediately realized that it was a smile. Different somehow. Everything has been rearranged since the last time we were there. We talked about it for a few minutes, but I didn't think too much about it, and neither did my husband. You might fall asleep in a few minutes if we hadn't noticed after getting into bed that we hadn't done it. Making love for a few days because just thinking about it and returning to the room, we were already in the mood. I won't explain it in detail, but long story short, there's a lamp on the bedside table that didn't light up. It wasn't there before, and because we weren't used to it there, and our excitement, we dropped it. Everything shattered when it touched the floor, causing us to stop what we were doing to clean up the mess. But my husband found something in the pile of broken ceramics. Something that looked like a button just a few seconds ago, a spy camera. My reaction felt like I was about to vomit, but I had never seen my husband's face reddened with such intense anger so quickly. He dressed and rushed out of the room, then burst through the door into the host on the side of the house and barged into his bedroom. I didn't follow, but I listened to my husband threaten to kill him if he didn't explain himself. After that, there was a prolonged, heated interrogation. I can't explain everything, but from what my husband told me, he made the host confess through many crocodile tears that he had been spying on us in the bedroom all along, and that he had just installed an additional camera when he knew we were coming again. We tried to get him to delete all the recordings, but the worst part is it was already too late because the host was a very weird and creepy guy. He posted the recordings. He had to several porn sites, which basically means there's no way to know how many people have seen us in our private time. Together, practically impossible for me to completely erase that recording from existence if someone else has downloaded it. Of course, this ordeal was more devastating than just our vacation with friends, and we're just at the beginning of pressing charges, if not. I'll be more open to revealing every little detail related to him as a way to get revenge. But I'd rather see him rot in jail, so I'll do it the right way and keep it secret. I used to rent out my garage apartment as an Airbnb. I've never had any major issues, so I never checked the bookings carefully before accepting them. But if I decide to host guests on Airbnb again, it'll be something I'll change about how I do things. I'm sure it's only a matter of time before I have an experience with a guest who's really crazy and truly disruptive. So I'll have to stop hosting guests, so I don't have to deal with something like that again. Again, the guest in question is this person, I'll do it, called Kyle. He's a single guy in his early 30s who wanted to stay for a week. He didn't mention that he was traveling or anything, he just said he really needed a somewhat unusual place to stay. But I didn't do it. I didn't think too much about it when I met him for check-in. He didn't have a lot of stuff, just a backpack, a duffel bag, and a broken bike. I could tell just by looking at him that he was in a tough spot, maybe even homeless, which made me wonder how he was paying the fees. It seemed like he hadn't bathed or taken care of himself in weeks, and overall his demeanor was quite restless. But at the time, he wasn't rude at all. He was actually quite friendly and appreciative, even though he's like this. I didn't treat him differently after I gave him the usual tour. I left him alone, and I told him to mind his own business, like I would tell anyone else. Unfortunately, as time went by, I slowly realized that Kyle would be trouble. I could hear booming music from inside constantly, and no matter how many times I messaged him to turn it down, he never did when I knocked on the door to tell him directly. I would see his shadow moving inside and hear him frantically rummaging things like he was trying to hide something, but he wouldn't answer. I debated about entering with my own key, but I decided not to. It really started to make me uneasy more than anything, because I had never done that before. The biggest red flag that I should have taken more seriously was the smell coming from the door. It felt like burning plastic or something. At the time, I didn't know what the smell was coming from, but afterwards it became very clear what he was doing in there and what caused it. I should have kicked him out sooner, but after a few days I thought I would let him stay until the end of his booking, because the distance wasn't too far after he was there for a week. It was finally time for the guest to usually leave, just like that when it's time to check out, and I'm grateful I didn't have to interact with him again. I'm also glad that the annoying music finally stopped, but I'm nervous to go in and see what kind of mess he made. I have to go in and check because I'm the one who will clean it up, and let me just say I was shocked the whole place was trashed. All the furniture had been moved. There was trash everywhere. Food supplies were on every kitchen surface, and one of the pots was completely destroyed because it was coated in a white substance that I couldn't identify for my life. The entire apartment also smelled just as bad as the garage did. I tore myself to go to the bathroom with an odd feeling when I got there. The door was locked frustratingly. I went briefly to get into my house and grab a hairpin so I could unlock the door. But when I returned, the bathroom door was open. A cold breeze creeping down my spine, and I suddenly felt very uneasy. Then I heard a sound from the kitchen that made my heart sink. The glass broke. I crept down the hallway and stopped in the corner and slowly peeked around only to see Kyle standing there with a broken bottle in one hand and a metal baseball bat in the other. When I stared into his eyes, I knew he was twisted on something, and seeing me caused him to go ballistic and start yelling at me. "Who are you? Get out of my house! Don't mess with me! I swear to God I'll kill you!" I started backing towards the door, avoiding sudden movements while I tried to explain myself. "Kyle, I'm the host. I let you stay here, remember?" I didn't remember. "You don't try to fool me." He said, "I'm not lying to you. I swear. Look, come on, let's talk about this. Can you put all that? You just started screaming at me after that, repeatedly telling me to shut up. Then Kyle suddenly attacked me, turning around and running out the door, but before I was clear in the turn, I felt a glass bottle hit my back and shatter and hurt me badly. I kept running until I could get away safely. I got back into my car. House and I locked the door from there. I called the police. I'm sure the standoff between Kyle and the police is also another story, but unfortunately, I missed most of what I saw was just them leaving with 4 or 5 officers and coming out with Kyle's hands and legs bound double in shackles and screaming bloody murder when I found out Kyle was smoking the whole time he was staying in my garage apartment. And he finally got so upset that he forgot he was just a guest. He should have left after a week after that. There was always a feeling of unease in my mouth every time I thought about it letting another stranger stay on my property, so I canceled all my bookings and deleted my account. I guess I'll never try my luck again.